The buzzer echoed through the gymnasium as the ball left my fingertips. Time seemed to slow, the orange sphere rotating in perfect arcs against the backdrop of fluorescent lights. The crowd held their collective breath, including Coach Wilson, whose dismissive words from 3 months earlier still rang in my ears. Basketball isn't for everyone, Jasmine. Some people just don't have the right build for it. I was 12 years old when I learned that sometimes the world decides what you can be before you even get a chance to try. Growing up in a small town where basketball was religion, I lived and breathed the sport from the moment I could walk. My father had played semi-professionally before an injury sidelined his career, and he'd passed his love of the game to me through countless evenings in our driveway. The sound of the ball bouncing against concrete became the heartbeat of my childhood, a steady, reliable rhythm that connected me to something bigger than myself. "Keep your elbow tucked, Jazzy," Dad would say, demonstrating the perfect form. "Follow through like you're reaching into a cookie jar on the highest shelf." By 6th grade, I'd developed a shooting percentage that made the neighborhood boys invite me to their pickup games. Begrudgingly at first, then with genuine respect. I wasn't just good for a girl. I was good, period. My crossover made defenders stumble, and my three-pointer rarely missed. Basketball wasn't something I did. It was something I was. So when tryouts for Westwood Middle School's prestigious basketball team were announced that fall, I knew this was my moment. The Westwood Warriors had won the district championship 3 years running under Coach Wilson's leadership. Making that team meant everything. Validation, belonging, a path forward. The morning of tryouts, Mom braided my hair tightly against my scalp, her fingers working with practiced precision. "You nervous?" she asked, securing a braid with a small elastic. "A little," I admitted, fidgeting with the hem of my shorts. "Coach Wilson is tough." Mom met my eyes in the mirror. "You've got more natural talent than half those boys put together. Just play your game, baby." I nodded, trying to absorb her confidence. Mom had been the first black female doctor in our town's history. She knew something about breaking barriers. The gymnasium was alive with squeaking sneakers and bouncing balls when I arrived. 24 boys, and only 2 other girls had shown up. I recognized most of them from school, including Tyler Matthews, Coach Wilson's nephew, and the presumed star of the upcoming season despite being in the same grade as me. Coach Wilson stood clipboard in hand, his weathered face impassive as he surveyed the hopefuls. His gaze lingered on me for a beat too long, something unreadable in his expression. "All right, listen up," he called, his voice slicing through the chatter. "We've got 3 days of tryouts. Today we're checking fundamentals. Tomorrow is scrimmage. Final cuts posted Friday. Warriors are champions. And I only take champions. Show me what you've got." The drills began simply enough. Layups, free throws, dribbling exercises. I executed each one flawlessly, the ball an extension of my body. When we moved to passing drills, I delivered crisp, accurate chest passes that smacked satisfyingly into my partner's hands. I caught some of the boys watching me with surprise, and a few of the parents in the bleachers whispered to each other. I pretended not to notice, focusing instead on the next drill, then the next. By the end of the session, my t-shirt was soaked with sweat, but I felt good, confident even. I'd outperformed at least half the boys there and neither of the other. Girls could match my shooting consistency. "Nice work, everyone," Coach Wilson announced. "Same time tomorrow. Be ready to play hard." As the gym began to empty, I gathered my water bottle and towel, a smile playing at my lips. Day 1. Success. "Jasmine, hold up," Coach Wilson called. I turned, expecting, I'm not sure what. Praise, maybe? A word of encouragement? His face was carefully neutral as he approached, clipboard clutched against his chest like a shield. "You've got some decent fundamentals," he said, his eyes not quite meeting mine. "Thank you, Coach. I've been playing since... But I think you should consider trying out for something else. Volleyball, maybe. Track." The floor seemed to tilt beneath me. "What? Why?" He shifted his weight, glancing toward the exit where the last few kids were leaving. "Basketball is a physical game, especially the way we play it here. You're..." He gestured vaguely at me. "Not really built for it." Heat crawled up my neck. "I don't understand. I made all my shots. My passing was good. I kept up with everyone." "It's not about the drills, Jasmine. When we get to real gameplay, you'd be at a disadvantage. I'm trying to save you the disappointment." "But you said tryouts are 3 days." I insisted, my voice embarrassingly close to breaking. "I haven't even had a chance to scrimmage yet." Coach Wilson sighed, the sound heavy with forced patience. "Look, I've been coaching for 20 years. I know what works for this team, what makes a warrior. And I'm telling you, as someone who wants what's best for you, that you should explore other options." I stood there, my mouth suddenly dry, as the implications sank in. This wasn't about my skills. This wasn't even about the 3-day tryout process. He'd decided before I'd even touched the ball. "Is it because I'm a girl?" I finally asked, the words small but sharp. His expression hardened. "This isn't about that. This is about physical realities, about what makes sense for the team." But he didn't look at me as he said it, and something in his avoidance told me everything I needed to know. It wasn't just because I was a girl. Plenty of girls had played for Westwood before, though none had started. It was something more, something neither of us was saying aloud. "I'd like to finish tryouts," I said, summoning every ounce of dignity I could muster. "I earn that much." Coach Wilson's jaw tightened. For a moment I thought he might refuse outright. Instead, he gave a curt nod. "Suit yourself, but I'm telling you now, don't get your hopes up." I walked home alone that afternoon, the autumn air crisp against my tear-stained cheeks. The familiar streets of my neighborhood seemed different somehow. Sharper. Less welcoming. When I reached our driveway, I didn't go inside. Instead, I grabbed the basketball from the garage and began shooting. One shot, then another, each one accompanied by Coach Wilson's voice in my head. Not built for it. Not right for the team. I was still shooting when Dad's car pulled in 2 hours later. He watched silently for a few minutes before approaching. "Rough day?" he asked, loosening his tie. The ball left my hands, arcing perfectly through the hoop with a satisfying swish. "Coach Wilson doesn't think I should be on the team. He wants me to try volleyball instead." Dad's expression darkened. "Did he say why?" "He said I'm not built for basketball." The words still stung, fresh and raw. "He said he's trying to save me from disappointment." Dad took the rebounding ball, turning it in his hands thoughtfully. "And what do you think?" "I think he decided before he even saw me play. I think..." My voice caught. "I think it's because of how I look." The silence between us was heavy with understanding. We'd had versions of this conversation before, when I came home asking why a classmate had touched my hair without permission, or when a store clerk had followed us suspiciously through the aisles. Dad passed the ball back to me. "So what are you going to do about it?" I looked at him, puzzled. "What can I do? He's the coach." "Jasmine Marie Taylor," Dad said, his voice gentle but firm. "Since when do you let someone else tell you what you're capable of?" I didn't have an answer for that. You've got 2 more days of tryouts, right? He continued. Then you've got 2 more days to change his mind. Or at the very least, to make absolutely sure he knows what he's giving up. That night at dinner, Mom wanted to call the school principal. Her eyes flashed with the same fire I'd seen when a patient questioned her credentials, or when our neighbor suggested we might be more comfortable in a different neighborhood. This is exactly the kind of subtle discrimination that goes unchallenged, she fumed, fork stabbing at her salad. If he's doing this to you, he's doing it to others. Let Jasmine handle it her way first, Dad suggested, giving me a meaningful look. She deserves the chance to fight her own battle. Mom relented, but only after extracting a promise that if things didn't improve, we'd take it higher. The second day of tryouts arrived cloudy and cool. I'd barely slept, spending hours instead practicing in the basement, running drills until my arms ached and my legs trembled. I arrived early, determined to show Coach Wilson exactly what he was missing. The gym was nearly empty when I walked in, just Coach Wilson setting up cones and Tyler shooting casually at the far basket. They both looked up when the door closed, behind me. You're early, Coach Wilson observed, surprise evident in his voice. Yes, sir, I replied, dropping my bag and retrieving my ball. Thought I'd get some extra shots up. He watched as I began my warm-up routine, his expression unreadable. After a few minutes, he returned to his preparation, but I could feel his occasional glances. When everyone arrived, Coach Wilson divided us into 4 teams for scrimmage. I was placed with some of the weaker players against Tyler's stacked team of returnees and stronger newcomers. The message couldn't have been clearer. He was setting me up to fail. First team to 21 wins, Coach announced. Show me who wants it. The game began roughly, with my teammates hesitant to pass me the ball, despite my open position. After 3 possessions, where I was ignored completely, I finally cut aggressively to the basket, practically forcing Marcus to give up the rock or turn it over. Ball in hand, I drove hard to the hoop, absorbing contact from Tyler's extended arm before finishing with a smooth layup. The gym went momentarily quiet. Foul, Coach Wilson called. Offensive, charging on Jasmine. I blinked in disbelief. What? He wasn't set. Don't argue calls, Coach responded flatly. Tyler's ball. And so it went. Every aggressive move I made was called a foul. Every defensive stand was ignored when the opposing player pushed back. By halftime, frustration threatened to overwhelm me. He's not even trying to be fair, I muttered to no one in particular as I grabbed water. To my surprise, Marcus, a quiet 8th grader who'd barely acknowledged me before, nodded in agreement. Yeah, it's pretty obvious, but you're still balling out. Something about his simple recognition steadied me. I returned to the court with renewed focus, changing my strategy. If direct drives were going to be called fouls, I'd beat them from the outside. The first 3-pointer I sank was met with raised eyebrows. The second drew murmurs. By the third, a step-back jumper that had Tyler stumbling, even Coach Wilson had stopped writing on his clipboard to watch. We still lost the scrimmage, handicapped as we were by both team composition and officiating. But as we lined up for the next round of games, I caught Tyler watching me with something like respect. Not bad, Taylor, he said as we passed each other. For someone who's just supposed to be filling space. The comment stung, revealing that Coach had apparently discussed his intentions regarding my tryout with others. But I refused to let it show. Thanks, Matthews, I replied evenly. Maybe I'll teach you that step back sometime. His eyes widened fractionally before he masked it with a scoff. But I'd seen it. The momentary acknowledgement that perhaps Coach Wilson had misjudged. By the end of the day, I'd scored more points across all scrimmages than anyone except Tyler and James, an 8th grader who'd been a starter the previous year. My team had won 2 of 5 games, despite the stacked odds. And though Coach Wilson said nothing directly to me, I caught him watching my shooting form with thoughtful concentration. Hope flickered tentatively as I walked home. Maybe, just maybe, I'd done enough to change his mind. The final day of tryouts focused on conditioning and situational drills. I pushed through suicides and defensive slides until my lungs burned, never once faltering or asking for a break. During the shooting competitions, I placed second only to James. In the one-on-one King of the Court drill, I held my spot through 3 challengers before Tyler finally dislodged me with a contested jumper that barely grazed the net. As we gathered for final remarks, sweat-soaked and breathing hard, I allowed myself to believe I'd earned a spot. Not as a starter, perhaps, but at least on the bench. No one could deny I belonged among the top 12 players in that gym. "Good work today, everyone," Coach Wilson said, pacing before our exhausted line. This is always the hardest part of coaching, making cuts. Some of you showed real improvement over these 3 days. Others demonstrated why you've been warriors before. His eyes skimmed over us, pausing imperceptibly on me before moving on. "List will be posted outside my office tomorrow morning at 8. If you don't see your name, don't be discouraged. There are other sports, other ways to represent Westwood." A cold knot formed in my stomach. He was looking directly at me as he said those last words. I lingered after the others left, approaching Coach Wilson as he gathered equipment. "Coach," I began, my voice steadier than I felt. "I just wanted to say thank you for the opportunity to try out." He straightened, regarding me with a mixture of what might have been respect and discomfort. "You worked hard, Jasmine. That was evident. I know I can contribute to this team." I pressed on. My shooting percentage was among the highest. My ball handling. "It's not always about statistics," he interrupted. "A team is like a machine. Each part has to fit perfectly with the others." The implication hung between us, unspoken but unmistakable. I didn't fit. "How will you know if you don't give me a chance?" I asked quietly. For a moment, something like doubt flickered across his features. Then his expression hardened. "The list will be posted tomorrow," he said firmly. "That's all I can tell you right now." I stood outside the athletic office at 7:45 the next morning, heart hammering against my ribs. By 7:50, a small crowd had gathered, nervous hopefuls, and their friends offering moral support. At precisely 8 o'clock, Coach Wilson emerged with a single sheet of paper, which he taped to the bulletin board without ceremony. He caught my eye briefly before retreating back into his office, closing the door with a definitive click. The crowd surged forward. I hung back, suddenly afraid of what I'd find. Or rather, what I wouldn't find. "Hey, Jasmine," called Marcus, who'd already reached the list. "Did you see?" I steeled myself, pushing through to the front. My eyes scanned quickly. 1. Tyler Matthews. 2. James Washington. 3. Devin Rodriguez. 4. Marcus. Chen 5. Brendan Taylor, no relation. 6. Kai Patel. 7. Anthony Garcia. 8. Christopher Lee. 9. Miguel Sanchez. 10. Jackson Williams. 11. Ethan Cooper. 12. Daniel Scott. My name wasn't there. The disappointment was a physical thing. A weight pressing against my chest, making it difficult to breathe. I'd proven myself. I'd outplayed half the boys on that list. And still, it wasn't enough. "That's messed up," Marcus said, low enough that only I could hear. "You deserved a spot." I nodded numbly, unable to formulate a response. Around me, successful candidates celebrated with high fives and fist bumps. The other rejected hopefuls drifted away, disappointment evident in slumped shoulders and downcast eyes. I remained frozen, staring at the list as though I could change it through sheer force of will. The bell rang, signaling 5 minutes until first period. Slowly, I turned away from the bulletin board, gathering the tattered remains of my dignity around me like a shield. "Jasmine." Coach Wilson stood in his office doorway, beckoning me over with a slight nod. I approached warily, uncertain what more there was to say. "I wanted to explain my decision," he began once we were alone in his office, the door closed, against curious onlookers. "You don't need to explain, Coach," I said, surprising myself with how calm I sounded. "You made yourself clear from the beginning." He had the grace to look uncomfortable. "Look, you've got talent. I won't deny that. But basketball at this level, it gets physical, aggressive. The districts we play against wouldn't. They might not be as accepting." My jaw tightened. "You mean they might not be accepting of someone who looks like me?" "That's not—" He started, then stopped, sighing heavily. "I'm trying to protect you, Jasmine, from things a 12-year-old shouldn't have to deal with." "With all due respect, Coach Wilson," I replied, looking him directly in the eye. "I deal with those things every day, whether I'm on a basketball court or not. The only difference is whether I'm allowed to show what I can do while I'm dealing with them." Something shifted in his expression, a flicker of recognition perhaps, or shame. "The decision's been made," he said finally. "But I'll tell you." "What?" "You keep practicing. Come to the games. If an opportunity opens up, we'll reevaluate." It was a bone thrown to appease me. Empty words meant to soften the blow. We both knew no opportunity would materialize. But I nodded anyway, not trusting myself to speak further without breaking down. I didn't tell my parents right away. Instead, I went straight to the outdoor courts at Riverside Park after school, shooting basket after basket, as the afternoon shadows lengthened. The familiar rhythm of dribble, set, shoot became a meditation, each completed shot a small victory against the day's defeat. "Thought I might find you here." I turned to find Dad approaching, still in his work clothes but with his tie loosened and sleeves rolled up. "You heard?" I asked, though it wasn't really a question. He nodded, picking up a stray ball and spinning it in his hands. "Your mom's ready to march down there and give Coach Wilson a piece of her mind." Despite everything, I smiled faintly. "I bet she is." "I told her we should ask what you want to do first." I considered this, taking the ball from him and shooting. Swish. "I want to keep playing," I said simply. Dad nodded as though he'd expected nothing less. "Then that's what you'll do." And so began what Mom later called my revenge training montage. Though revenge wasn't exactly what I had in mind. Every morning before school, I'd run 2 miles around the neighborhood. Every afternoon, I'd practice at Riverside until dinner. Weekends were for strength training with Dad and studying game footage of the greats. Jordan, Bird, Magic, and my personal hero, Cheryl Swoops. I attended every Westwood Warriors home game, sitting in the front row directly across from the team bench. I wanted Coach Wilson to see me, to be reminded of what he'd dismissed. Sometimes during timeouts he'd glance my way, our eyes meeting briefly before he looked away. The Warriors started the season strong, winning their first 4 games handily. Tyler was everything Coach Wilson had expected, quick, aggressive, with natural court vision that made him dangerous, both as a scorer and a facilitator. But as the competition intensified, in mid-November cracks began to show in the team's armor. It was during the game against Eastside, their toughest rival, that disaster struck. Tyler, driving hard to the basket in the third quarter, came down awkwardly after being fouled. The crack of his ankle giving way was audible even from the stands. The gym fell silent as he writhed on the court, his agonized face telling the story before the trainer even reached him. Fractured ankle. Out for at least 6 weeks. The Warriors lost that game by 17 points, their offense sputtering without its centerpiece. In the following game against Lakeside, they struggled to a 5-point victory against a team they should have beaten easily. The third game post-Tyler was an embarrassing 20-point loss to Northfield, a team that had never before beaten Westwood. I watched it all from my front row seat, observing how the team's dynamic had collapsed without Tyler's leadership. Marcus tried valiantly to step up, but he lacked Tyler's scoring ability. Kai had the shooting touch but couldn't create his own opportunities. The team was adrift, and Coach Wilson seemed increasingly desperate. After the Northfield loss, he caught me as I was leaving the gym. "Jasmine!" he called, jogging to catch up as I pushed through the exit doors. "Got a minute?" I stopped, turning to face him with neutral expression. "Yes, Coach?" He looked tired, the stress of 3 difficult games etched into the lines around his eyes. "You've been at every game." "Yes, sir." "And you're still playing? Practicing?" I nodded. "Every day." He seemed to be weighing something internally, his gaze assessing me with new consideration. "We're struggling without Tyler," he admitted finally. "The offense isn't flowing. We need someone who can create shots, who can shoot from outside too. Open up the lane." My heart rate accelerated, but I kept my face carefully composed. "That's true." "I'm wondering," he continued, the words coming slowly, as if each one cost him something, "if you'd be interested in joining practices. Maybe joining the team until Tyler returns." 3 weeks earlier, this was all I had wanted. Now, faced with the actual offer, I found myself hesitating. "You said I wasn't built for your style of play," I reminded him. "That I wouldn't fit with the machine." He had the decency to look uncomfortable. "I may have misjudged certain aspects of your game." "And what about the other teams? The ones who might not be as accepting?" Coach Wilson's jaw tightened. "That's my concern, not yours. If you're on my team, I deal with that." I studied him, trying to discern his sincerity. Was this a genuine change of heart, or merely desperation in the face of a losing record? "I'd need to be treated like any other player," I said finally. "No special rules, no different standards." "Of course. And I want a real jersey, not just a practice penny." A faint smile touched his lips. "I think we can manage that." "Number?" 23, I replied without hesitation. "Jordan fan?" "Swoops," I corrected. "She wore 23 at Texas Tech." He nodded, extending his hand. "Practice tomorrow, 3:30 sharp." I shook it firmly. "I'll be there at 3. The first practice was awkward, to say the least. The boys, who had all seen me play during tryouts, were mostly welcoming, if a bit uncertain. Marcus immediately took me under his wing, partnering with me during drills and making sure I was included in the rotation. Others, like Brendan and Jackson, maintained a cool distance, clearly skeptical of my sudden inclusion. Coach Wilson, for his part, seemed determined to treat me exactly as I'd requested, like any other player. He pushed me hard, critiquing my defense and challenging my decision-making during scrimmages. There was a new respect underlying his intensity, though, a tacit acknowledgement that he was no longer just going through the motions, until I gave up. By the end of the week, I'd earned a spot in the starting lineup for our upcoming game against Westridge. The announcement sent ripples through the team. Some supportive, others less so. "No offense, Jasmine," Brendan said during a water break, his voice carrying just enough for nearby teammates to hear. "But shouldn't someone who actually made the team get that spot?" Before I could respond, Marcus stepped in. "She's out playing. Everyone except maybe James. You saw the scrimmage today." "Yeah, but it's one thing to play well in practice. Games are different." "Guess we'll find out tomorrow, won't we?" I replied evenly, meeting his gaze without flinching. The Westridge game arrived cloudy and cold, a December chill settling over the town as we filed onto the bus. I sat alone, my gym bag occupying the space beside me, using the solitude to focus on the task ahead. "Mind if I sit?" I looked up to find Coach Wilson standing in the aisle, his expression uncharacteristically uncertain. "Sure," I replied, moving my bag. He settled beside me, and for a few minutes we rode in silence. "Nervous?" he asked finally. I considered lying, then decided against it. "A little. First game and all." He nodded. "That's normal. Expected, even." Another stretch of silence. "I owe you an apology, Jasmine," he said suddenly, his voice low enough that only I could hear. "I made assumptions about what you could handle, about what was best for the team. I was wrong." The admission caught me off guard. I'd expected Coach Wilson to maintain his professional distance, to treat my inclusion as a necessary adjustment, rather than a corrected mistake. "Thank you for saying that," I managed. "Just play your game today," he continued. "The game I've been seeing in practice. That's all I'm asking." The Westridge gymnasium was packed, the rivalry between our schools drawing a larger crowd than usual. As we warmed up, I tried to ignore the curious stares and whispered comments from the stands. "Focus on the ball," I reminded myself. "Everything else falls away when you play." The starting lineups were announced and I took my place at the center, circle alongside my teammates. Across from us, the Westridge players exchanged glances when my name was called, their surprise evident. "They've got a girl starting," one of them said, loud enough for me to hear. "This should be easy." I kept my expression neutral, even as determination hardened in my chest. Let them think what they wanted. The scoreboard would tell the truth. Soon enough, the game began tentatively, both teams feeling each other out. I handled the ball confidently, calling out plays and distributing to open teammates. My first shot, a 15-footer from the elbow, fell through cleanly, silencing the snickers from the Westridge bench. By halftime, I'd scored 11 points and registered 4 assists. We were up by 6, and the initial skepticism from both sides had transformed into something resembling respect. In the locker room, Coach Wilson's halftime talk centered on maintaining our defensive intensity and continuing to move the ball. "They don't have an answer for our perimeter game," he noted, nodding at me. "Let's keep exploiting that mismatch." The second half was more physical as Westridge adjusted, assigning their quickest defender to shadow me and deny the ball. I adapted, using screens more effectively and finding opportunities in transition. When they collapsed on my drives, I kicked out to open shooters. When they stayed home on shooters, I attacked the rim. With a minute left in the fourth quarter, the score was tied at 54. Coach Wilson called timeout, gathering us into a tight huddle. "All right, we've got the ball. Shot clock off. 1 possession to win this." All eyes turned to me, the player who'd scored 22 of our points and created opportunities for at least 15 more. "What do you think, Jasmine?" Coach asked. "You've been reading their defense all night." The question, the deference to my basketball intelligence, meant almost as much as being included on the team. 3 weeks ago, he couldn't even look me in the eye while telling me I didn't belong. Now he was asking me to design the game-winning play. "They're overplaying me on the wing," I said, briefly meeting each teammate's gaze. "Let's use that." Marcus sets a screen for me at the top of the key, but instead of using it, I'll reject it and drive baseline. "James, you flash to the strong side. Corner. If my man recovers, you'll be open. If their help defense collapses, Kai will be open on the weak side." Coach Wilson nodded approvingly. "Simple. Effective. Marcus, make sure that screen is solid. Everyone else, be ready if the first options aren't there." The whistle blew, and we returned to the court. The crowd noise swelled as they sensed the game's critical moment. I received the inbound pass, dribbling unhurriedly at the top of the arc as the clock wound down. With 12 seconds left, Marcus approached to set the screen. I gave a slight head fake toward it before exploding in the opposite direction, catching my defender off balance. The baseline opened up exactly as I'd anticipated. 2 dribbles took me to the edge of the paint. The help defense arrived a beat too late. I gathered myself, elevated, and released a soft floater over the outstretched hand of Westridge's center. The ball kissed off the backboard and dropped through the hoop as the buzzer sounded. 56-54. Warriors win. The gym erupted. My teammates swarmed me, lifting me onto their shoulders as the visiting section of Westwood supporters chanted my name. Through the chaos, I caught sight of Coach Wilson standing apart from the celebration, a complex mixture of emotions playing across his face. Pride, certainly, but also something that looked remarkably like atonement. In the weeks that followed, I started every game, leading the Warriors to 7 straight victories. By the time Tyler was cleared to return in late January, there was no question of me returning to the sidelines. Instead, Coach Wilson restructured the lineup to accommodate both of us, creating a dynamic backcourt that opponents struggled to contain. We finished the season as district champions, with me setting a school record for 3-pointers made by a first-year player. At the year-end banquet, Coach Wilson presented me with the Most Improved Player Award, an ironic title for someone who hadn't changed at all, who had simply been given the opportunity to show what was always there. "This player," Coach said during his presentation speech, "taught me more about courage and determination than I could ever have taught her." She reminded me why I started coaching in the first place, to help young people discover their potential, not to decide in advance what that potential might be. Our eyes met across the banquet hall, a moment of mutual recognition passing between us, acknowledgement of how far we'd both come from that first dismissive encounter. In the years that followed, I continued to play basketball, eventually earning a scholarship to play at the collegiate level. Coach Wilson and I maintained a relationship built on hard-earned respect, with him attending many of my college games and offering guidance when I expressed interest in coaching after graduation. Life has a way of bringing things full circle, though. 20 years after that transformative season, I found myself back in my hometown, recently divorced and rebuilding my life as the new athletic director at Westwood High School. In my 3rd week on the job, I received an unexpected visitor. Coach Wilson, now in his 60s, walking with a slight limp and considerably less hair than I remembered. "Coach," I greeted him, rising from behind my desk. "What brings you by?" His smile was tinged with nervousness. "I heard about your appointment. Wanted to congratulate you in person." We exchanged pleasantries, catching up on the intervening years. He'd retired from coaching 5 years earlier, but still taught physical education at the middle school. "Actually," he admitted finally. "I came to ask a favor. The middle school program is struggling. Budget cuts, lack of interest. We're down to just one coaching position for both boys and girls basketball." I nodded, familiar with the financial challenges facing school athletic programs. "I'm not as quick as I used to be," he continued, gesturing to his knee. "Can't demonstrate the way the kids need. And to be honest, I'm not connecting with them the way I once did." Understanding dawned. "You're looking for a replacement?" "An assistant at first," he clarified. "Someone who knows the game, who can connect with today's kids. Someone who might eventually take over." The irony wasn't lost on either of us. The coach who had once deemed me unsuitable for his team, now asking me to help preserve his legacy. "I'd understand if you weren't interested," he added when I didn't immediately respond. "Our history—" "I'll do it," I interrupted. "Not because of our history, but because those kids deserve someone who believes in their potential. All of their potential." Relief washed over his weathered features. "Thank you, Jasmine. I promise you won't regret it." As I watched him leave my office, I couldn't help but reflect on the journey that had brought us both to this point. The 12-year-old girl who'd been told she didn't belong could never have imagined one day holding the power to shape athletic opportunities for a new generation. I think about that moment often now, as I work with young athletes finding their own paths. Sometimes the greatest victories aren't the ones that show up on a scoreboard, but the ones that change how we see each other and ourselves. Have you ever faced someone who underestimated you, only to prove them wrong when given the chance? I'd love to hear your story. And if you know someone who needs a reminder that perseverance can overcome prejudice, please share this with them. Sometimes the most important thing we can do is keep showing up, keep proving ourselves, until the world has no choice but to see us for who we truly are.